I guess it comes down to a simple choice, really. Get busy living or get busy dying.
Are you ready to make the most of the only life you have? To make smart money choices focused on achieving what you care about most? Here to help you balance living well today without sacrificing your tomorrow is the Retirement Answer Man, Roger Whitney.
Last July, after my third knee surgery, meeting with the doctor, he strongly recommended that I never run again. He says, there's other things that you can do. Bicycle, cycling's great for your knee, but don't run again. Now, I do like to bicycle, but I've done marathons. I did an Ironman, done a lot of triathlons, love to run in the woods. And what struck me, and what really started to gnaw at me, was the thought that, at least physically, my best days are behind me. That's a kind of thought that can really sink in and then seep in to other parts of your psyche, that the best days of your life are behind you. A friend of mine, Jim Cockrum, said the natural state of all things is to degrade or diminish over time. Think of a Buick sitting out in a yard. He says it doesn't get better with age. It just sits there and rusts. I think that's true for people as well. We always have to have a growth mindset in some way. And if you don't know whether you have a growth mindset or not, and whether you're growing as a person, you're not. So last week when we talked to Mark Miller about the practicalities of pivoting in a career as being part of the answer to what many may be facing as a retirement crisis, I think maybe even before that, we need to reignite the growth mindset that we may have lost, or it may be ebbing in how we approach life. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But first, let's get to a couple other topics, including this important disclaimer. That's right. Time for the all-important disclaimer. Don't take advice from me on the show. I work as a fiduciary for clients every day because I know a lot about them. I don't know anything about you. You don't know much about me. So think of this as helpful hints and education. Before you make decisions, talk to your legal advisor, your financial advisor, or your tax advisor, because that's just common sense. Now, let's get on to talking about this retirement crisis. So in the news today, we're still talking about this retirement crisis, which permeates how we think about the future. A lot of us, even if we have enough money to take care of ourselves, we're still worried about retirement. And I understand that. Part of the problem is that we only think of retirement as a number, a financial number that we have to achieve, or some hard date when we totally stop being productive in society. So if you look at financial firms, the major financial firms, most financial advisors, I would say, the media and the government, when they approach the topic of retirement, they define it as having enough resources to live without working or producing income, meaning that you're going to have enough financial assets between those and your pension and your Social Security that you'll never have to work again. So by defining retirement as this binary, you are either working and productive or you are not, it causes us to focus on, yes, important things, but not the entire picture of what retirement can be for you. So what are some of the things that this definition causes us to do? What causes us to focus on saving and investing as the central part of our retirement solution? Now, you could argue that that serves financial firms and it serves 401ks and everything else. Outside of that, it makes us focus on saving and investing. And just so happens that financial firms who spend billions of dollars marketing about retirement focus on asset management only, and primarily financial advisors focus on asset management only. And then when you go online, all the calculators, the retirement calculators, focus on what your assets can produce for you and helps you figure out whether you have enough assets yet or not. Well, given the dynamics that we've talked about over and over again about you and how you're not like your parents, you're going to live a lot longer. We're talking 20, 30, 40 years in quote unquote retirement now. You're going to spend a lot more because generally baby boomers are looking at retirement as how to live, not as how to rest. Given those dynamics and many more, the numbers never work. If retirement is only defined as a number or a binary date where you stop being productive. And by continuing to think of retirement only in this way, it frames all of our conversations and focus when you're dealing with the issue as a family or when you're working with an advisor to figure out possible solutions. It makes it very binary, as I said. You're either productive or you're not. And it starts to limit the options that you think you have to solve for creating a great retirement and a great life. And what that does is by limiting those options and defining retirement so narrowly in this outdated concept that worked for our parents that doesn't work for us, it stifles our creativity. And that has a real human cost to you and to everybody else. It could cause you to work way too hard trying to fill the gap that retirement calculator says you need to fill. It could make you work too long in something you really don't enjoy, a career that you are really good at, but it's not your passion. That's a big human cost that we've talked about over and over. So let's step back a second and talk about, okay, what resources do we actually have to solve this retirement crisis? Well, we have the hard resources, your savings, your investments, your value of your house, your pension, Social Security, Medicare, maybe you'll have some inheritances. These are all the hard things that almost all the thinking is focused on when you're planning for retirement. But you have a lot more resources at your disposal. You have a lifetime of skills that you've developed, in many instances, skills you don't even realize that you have. You have abilities, you have passion that may have been stamped down and ignored for a long period of time. And you have a lot of creativity. Now, many of you might question that. You may say, I'm not that creative. And I understand that. I said that for a long period of time. I never felt like I was a very creative person. I'm a numbers-driven guy. I'm very organized and systematic for the most part. I never really thought I had much creativity in my soul. And now, over a 3-4 year process of doing this podcast and getting to walk life with you, most people think I'm really creative, and then I'm sort of redefining myself. So I bet you're more creative than you think you are. You have flexibility, you have creativity, you have a network of people that care about you, either personally and professionally, that you may undervalue. We don't think about these things. We think about the hard assets, the hard resources when we're trying to solve for retirement, for our lives, this retirement crisis. But if we change our thinking and move beyond that, we can really change our world and how we approach creating a great life, and not thinking of it as this binary date, but actually as a relationship where we can incorporate some work, but work that we love, to help solve the equation. And I don't think we spend enough time there. And I'll be blunt, I don't think the advice that most people are getting are addressing these issues. I think they're limiting your choices and your creativity and how to create a great life by focusing on retirement as some date or some number that we have to focus on from a financial perspective. So how do we unleash some of this stuff? How do we start to put these pieces together? Well, Mark Miller last week talked in very practical terms This week, we're going to talk to someone who isn't just talking about it, he's creating it for himself, and he has helped tens of thousands of people create it for themselves. So let's get on to that conversation. So today we're going to talk with Dan Miller. Dan Miller wrote the book, 48 Days to the Work You Love. He is, as you'll find out, in his late 70s. He was happy I called that out. And he helps people think about leaving a full-time job that isn't their passion and is draining their life to taking a either part-time or full-time work that actually is more congruent with what natural skills and passions are for people. So he's not just talk the talk, he's walking the walk, and he's helped other people make those transitions. And that's the kind of people I like most, is because they have proven strategies for doing this. So let's have a talk with Dan Miller. So Dan, my first question is, I know you're in your late 60s. We won't say how old. But,
you're going to share that?
But why aren't you retired?
Oh my gosh. The concept somehow it makes me chuckle because I cannot imagine. Now, this is just me. I mean, I'm really opinionated in this area, but I really believe that if there's more in looking back at what I've done than what I can see in my future, I have very clearly told my body and my spirit to start shutting down. And I observed that so many times. People retire and 2 years later they're dead. Not because they were in poor health, because they didn't have any reason to get up in the morning. No purpose. Man, that is not me. I hope I die in the middle of a very productive day, just like the day before was. I have no plans. And people ask me that a lot. When am I going to retire? And this is as retired as I ever want to be.
So some of it is, the concept is, if my better days aren't ahead of me, then you get busy living or you get busy dying. That whole type of quote from, I think it was, I forget what the movie it was, but that quote of, you were at that jail where that was. You get busy living, you get busy dying.
You're talking about Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. So you just want to keep busy living. And for you, that involves a lot of the work that you do.
It does. Now, you've already aged me. I fully intend to accomplish more in the next 10 years than I have in my life in its entirety up to this point. And I'm not just blowing smoke. I mean, I really have some things in place where I think that's going to be a reality. That's what I intend to do. Well, and then I'll look at the next 10 years.
Well, let me ask you this then. You're blessed, but you created it, that you work on your own terms. I've been to the retreat where you do a lot of your business. So how does someone approach that, do you think, where they have that day job or that career that they feel like they're running away from? And not a lot of times that's what they're trying to do, is they go into retirement thinking they're pulling out the thorn of something they really don't enjoy doing.
Yeah, that's a very different place to be, granted. I'm the first to admit that. But in that pulling out the thorn and looking forward, counting the days to retirement, the message usually is, finally, I'm going to get to do what I really want to do. Now, some people that may mean, fishing and golfing all the time. But the message is, now I'm going to, for the first time in my life, really get to do what I want to do most. Well, that's not an issue for me. I'm doing it. But then that's my message to everybody. Why don't you draw a line in the sand? Figure out what you would really like to do that, put things in motion to do that. And all of a sudden, the appeal of retirement diminishes immediately.
Well, and it redefines it a little bit.
It does indeed.
And that's a great point. So if you want to live life on your own terms, or if you want to live a life fully, why would you wait?
That's right.
Right.
Why would you wait until you're 65 or whatever to have the opportunity to spend your time doing what you really want to do? There's too many opportunities today to have to wait. Nobody's trapped. And I talk to people, who are physicians, attorneys, dentists, pastors, who have that kind of feeling that they're trapped doing what they're doing, putting in a certain amount of time, and then they can escape the demands of that and do something they really enjoy. That's a big price to pay.
And I think what you're saying in that is that it's not go jump off, have that midlife crisis and go do but start to think creatively about your life to build the bridge to slowly create it. It's not like once you decide it just happens. It's a process, and it's the journey that really can invigorate a lot of things.
Absolutely. And yesterday, there's somebody on Facebook that put up a picture of one of my books that he read, said it really, changed his life, and he's retiring this Friday. Well, I sent a couple quick notes back and forth and figured out he's leaving a long-term corporate job. He has been building a side business with online selling that generates over $200,000 in net profit for him. I laughed. I said, "You're not retiring. Quit using that word. You're just transitioning into the next exciting chapter of your life." That's different. And I see people do that very effectively. So sometimes it's just kind of semantics and using that word inappropriately.
Yeah, and there's no new word yet, right? So that's just the word that's used.
Well, you're the retirement answer man. There you go. That's a new challenge for you. You need to come up with a word to identify, to describe that transition into a next season of life.
And I think that's what it is. And I remember when I was naming the podcast, because I'm not a big believer in the traditional way of retirement. So I'm like, why am I using that word? And I realized I had to enter the conversation where my audience is, which is maybe baby boomers, right? They're, the kids are about out of the house and they're wondering if they can make it. And a lot of times because of the numbers, because we're living so much longer and we're spending so much more money, that if you just run the numbers on trying to build up a nest egg, the traditional way of saving and investing, the number is almost insurmountable, and that's why we have a retirement crisis. What I think is wrong with that is it steals the power and the creativity of us to create our own life. We're dependent on just saving and investing, which is not very empowering.
And we get locked into those traditional models of what work is and how we generate income, and all of a sudden we're seeing very narrow boundaries. But wow, in today's environment, it just doesn't have to be that way. Roger, as you know, I have a daughter who works for me, but she lives on the road. She and her family, husband and 3 little girls, live full-time just traveling. They're in all these exotic places. And people are like, well, how can they do that? Did they get an inheritance? Or are they just depleting their resources? Not at all. They just figured out how to make it work, so they had the opportunity to do that. So it's not depleting anything. It's being very intentional, even early in life, about what kind of life do we want to live. And then being creative about how you can make that happen.
So let's talk about that from someone in their 50s. So if retirement isn't a date where you do nothing and it's more of a relationship where you gain freedom to pursue things that you actually enjoy rather than the career you might have fallen into, how do you start that journey?
It starts by looking inward. The interesting thing is people oftentimes look too quickly at external solutions, but it starts from just drawing a line in the sand and looking inward. What do I know about myself? How has God uniquely gifted me? What are unique skills that I have that are not common to everybody? How do I relate to other people? What kind of environments I'm most comfortable in? What are those recurring dreams that I have? From that, we get a lot of information, and all of a sudden we have a whole long list. We can come up with 20 ways that you can embrace those things you know about yourself and create income, and probably do it in a way that's not dependent on a paycheck from Corporation XYZ on Friday.
I would think from someone in their 50s who's been in, the normal environment of the career, then retirement and everything else, a lot of times that sounds sort of touchy-feely. Like it sounds foreign. Like I don't have anything special. I don't have anything that I could do from an entrepreneurial standpoint. How do you get over that?
Yeah, people have become numb to the things that excited them when they were children. A lot of times in sitting down with people like that, Roger, it's a matter of almost like peeling the onion. It's not a matter of superimposing something new, that they never heard of. It's peeling back the layers to identify what was it that excited you when you were 7 and 8 years old. What did you find yourself being drawn to when you were in high school? And it's rediscovering things that were there. But here's the real kind of application. I would rather help somebody grow dandelions and do it in a creative way that generated significant income than to try to talk them being a computer programmer because we know that's where the jobs are. But that's what we see superimposed all the time. Well, I have to major in this in college because there'll be a job. Whoa, that's a dangerous path to go down in light of the workplace today. There's a whole lot of kids getting degrees and things that are going to be obsolete before they get that piece of paper that says they graduated. We can't depend on that. So you have much more security by knowing what it is you do well, what you care about, than you will by trying to chase something artificial out here just to get a paycheck. And once people realize that, it's like they can take a deep breath and relax and not have to be captive of some external system. Then it's time to just get creative. What's that going to look like? And I have examples of a whole lot of people with ideas that other people would see as impractical. I mean, my gosh, Roger, you've been here to my place. You know that magnificent eagle that's carved out of a cedar tree as you approach my office. Well, the lady who did that was a corporate executive. And she was bored out of her mind, talked about her soul was being stolen from her. And she remembered how much she enjoyed carving wood with her daddy when she was a little girl. Now, she doesn't just, go to the park on Saturday mornings and do whistles or, little birds. She does these magnificent sculptures, and she makes extraordinary income, more than she ever made in a corporate environment, carving wood. Well, everybody would tell you that's impractical. That's unrealistic. You don't meet with your career counselor as a sophomore in college and they tell you to grow up and be a wood carver. Never going to happen. They look at this little confined list of dictionary occupational titles and choose something, and you try to make yourself fit that. That's a tough thing. We got to break out of that mold.
And I think in your 50s, once you've raised the family, built the household, got the kids through college, it's that, at least because I'm an empty nester right now, I'm 50 years old, and it's almost a renaissance of, okay, what's the rest of my life going to look like? That's sort of a good time to start rekindling what possibilities are. And what I like about you is that you do this every day with people. It's not that you're just preaching something that you haven't walked a life with people, tens of thousands of people, I imagine. So you gave one. Can you give some similar examples of someone that was in a corporate career that was able to slowly grow into something that they love that really redefined what their retirement was?
Sure. Here's another example. In my office here, back in an alcove, I've got this beautiful, big piece of art, painting. Well, the guy that did that came to see me as a pastor. He had gone to seminary, was ordained, and in as pastor of a church. Very respectable career path, right? He came to me. Now, he was working as a desk clerk at Holiday Inn during the week just to keep the lights on because his pay was so low. But he came to me. Church actually sent him to me. And I said, man, who sold you this bill of goods? And he was really taken back. Like, what do you mean? Am I not doing the most godly thing possible to do? I said, no, you're not. You're an imposter. You're trying to be something you're not. This is not you. I said, what is it that really makes you come alive? He says, well, I go into a room in our little rented house. I lock the door. I put on Beethoven or Mozart, and I just paint. It's when I'm in the zone. I mean, hearing him describe it just makes the hair stand up in the back of your neck. I had him quit everything he was doing. Now, we know what they say about artists. Artists are starving. Now, they don't make any money. Guess what? If that's how you are gifted, if that's how God has wired you, then that's exactly what we want to approach. Today, he makes certainly 5 times the money he ever dreamed of making as a pastor. They bought a house, sent all 5 of their kids through Belmont University here, living a life of their dreams. And he didn't walk away from his calling, his vocation at all. We just found a different application for it so he could do it more authentically. Now, that's the process that people can go through, but oftentimes they wait. They don't do that. They think, no, I'm trapped. I got to keep doing this even though I hate it. I have to keep doing this. And all of a sudden they're 65 years old, and then they don't really know themselves well enough to figure out what that would be.
Is the key that it's a process? Because it's not like you awaken one day and say, I'm pivoting and doing that, because that can lead to disaster if you don't go through the iterations of testing and working your way into it.
It is a process, but my brand.
48 days.
It's not 6 years. My brand is 48 days. I truly believe that is adequate time to assess where am I, get the advice and opinion of other people, identify 5 or 6 great options, do some more research, choose the best one and act. I really do believe that. I see people get caught in unnecessary procrastination. It doesn't take 2 years to figure this out. You don't have to go spend 6 months, in a monastery somewhere or go sit on a hillside and wait for a bolt of lightning. You really don't. A little bit of focused, intentional introspection can give you the clarity you need in 3 days.
And 48 Days is a great framework. The book, 48 Days to the Work You Love, is a great framework for going through that process. Now, I imagine part of that process is having to kill some sacred cows in terms of, let's say, the artist, because you don't know on the front end the income potential. A lot of people are in their 50s have built up lifestyles based on the income that comes from jobs that they aren't passionate about. So there's a readjustment there of maybe you can't live in that same house and blowing up some of those things to help get you to where you want to be. Is that something that you encounter?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And realistically, that's a great point. And I really ought to make a clarification there. With that gentleman who moved from being a pastor to an artist, he didn't go from being a pastor to the next day just doing these beautiful pieces of art. You got to establish your credibility, your brand, your reputation, and all that. For 4 years, he did faux finishes. So for 4 years, he did a more traditional kind of artistic application where he would use brushes, sponges, rags on people's walls, create these dramatic effects, but it was still paid by the project, right at the time. So he created income immediately by doing that. But in those 4 years, then it gave him the runway to go full time into just doing these dramatic pieces of art for which he's known today. Earlier today, I was contacted, got an email from a gentleman who is an accountant. He made all those decisions about career path. He's an accountant. He said, I cannot stand one more day of looking at the computer screen and pushing buttons. He says, drive me crazy. He said, I want to do something where you can see the work that you've done. I want to be an electrician or a plumber. I want to get into the trades. He said, but now how do I go from a 6-figure income to something that pays $13.50 an hour as an apprentice? So there is that realistic look. But that's, again, where we have to get creative. He's not locked into just being a $13.50 an hour apprentice. There's probably other things he could do with his passions along the way to create more instant, significant income anyway. And if it takes a year, here's the thing. If he's 32 years old, incidentally. So what if it takes 5 years to make that transition? Would you rather be miserable at 37 and have that respectable job that you hate? Or would you rather be doing what you knew all along that you really love doing? Wow, that's how we have to look at it. Time goes by. The years are going to go by anyway. Would you sacrifice 6 months or a year or 2 years to make that transition if that's what it took? But frankly, for most, I don't think it takes that long. My goal in working with people now, I really have the 48 days as the timeline to get clear and directed and up and running and going. But to fully be engaged to make a transition, I'm looking at 90 to 180 days. If we start something, my goal is to, in that period of time, duplicate whatever income you were making previously and go on from there. So we're talking 3 to 6 months. That's really not an unrealistic goal for pretty much everything we could come up with.
The audience of this show are mainly over 50, and they're feeling that pressure. And many, we know the numbers. Most people don't have enough money saved because the numbers just don't work for lots of reasons we've talked about. But just going through that process takes you from being on your heels and feeling acted upon and powerless to intentionality and feeling like you have your hands on the wheels and have working towards some control and all the things that sparks, right? Your creativity, the expansion of your network of friends and peers. There's so many things just from that mental shift to leaning forward and embracing it rather than sitting on your heels feeling powerless.
Absolutely. Now, I know that you deal with people in terms of income generation and then management, and growth through investments and things like that. I'm one of these guys that sees opportunity behind every bush. I am fully confident that I'll have more ideas at 80 years old about how to make money than I ever had at 40. There's just so many new things. And I know that not everybody's, an entrepreneur, but we've got to get out of this mentality that the only way to generate income is by getting a paycheck. from some remote company. I mean, wow. I mean, I know you teach people how to invest in themselves, and how to move their own investments forward. So you start to create passive income. My gosh, I've got things in place now that are going to create income that I can't stop. I mean, it was kind of funny when my kids realized that a few years ago. Gee, Dad's going to be gone, and we're still going to be getting checks that come in because of some things that are in place. Well, that's pretty cool. And there are a lot of ways to do that. There's not just one or two ways.
I always tell the story of a lady who used to sew and loved sewing, and then her son-in-law, I think it was, came to her and asked her to repair a flag. And so she repaired the flag, and he ended up being the manager of a real estate company where they had tons of properties across Dallas-Fort Worth, and obviously they had tons of flags, and it's windy in Dallas. So she ended up leaving her day job and making like $80,000 a year repairing flags.
Oh, I love it.
As an example. But I think this is the key to, I think, what we call the retirement crisis is redefine retirement. And I think it solves a lot of the financial part. And I think where we might end with is that it doesn't just solve the financial part. I look at you and your wife, Joanne, and you're like who I want to be when I'm, I already called you out about how old you are, when I'm way old like you. In that you're alive, you're engaged. You look at your social network are not, people that are all older than you or the same age. I mean, you got young cool guys like me in your network.
That's right.
And you're creatively alive, and that to the quality of life aspect. I mean, talk about your quality of life and the people that you've worked with and walked this journey with. It changes.
Oh my, it does. It does. Our biggest event that we had last year, over 50% of the attendees were under 35. That's pretty stinking cool. When we do cruises, we have a lot of couples in their 30s, and I'm honored by that. So that I age, I don't just, connect and relate to old guys like me. I mean, man, I want to keep people around me and on my team that keep me abreast of new innovations and of creative things. And of course, I got a whole bunch of grandkids that remind me of that. I got some here on the property right now waiting for me to come out and go down the zip line with them. Hey, we'll do that. But yeah, I mean, age is something that is not determined by the calendar as much as it is by mindset. And when I see the things that I'm looking forward to in terms of projects, income generation, relationships, travel, all those kind of things. Those things keep me excited just day after day after day.
Well, there was a wise man that once said, maybe you know this quote, "It's never too late to be the person you always wanted to be." Right? I forget who that guy was. Oh, wait, that was you.
That's exactly right.
That was you. So the way to connect with you, and I can easily say this, 48 Days. Google 48days.com. Dan has a wonderful podcast, and he actually walks the journey helping people figure this out. So connect with him. You have an online community of tens of thousands of people. And I think this really is the answer to the retirement crisis and creating a great life. Thank you so much, Dan.
Hey, I appreciate that. I love the work that you're doing to help people see this with new eyes. It's a really hot spot as we have all these baby boomers like me, approaching retirement age and then panicking. We just need to help them see things that are available that they haven't been able to see. So I commend you on the work you're doing.
On your marks, get set.
Hey, welcome to the Smart Sprint segment where we set a very tiny baby step for the next 7 days that you can take to start creating a great life and a great retirement. So your action item for the next 7 days is go check out Dan Miller's podcast. Each week, he talks about how to make this transition and answers listener questions. And he has a great community that can help you start thinking a little bit more creatively so you can start looking at the best days are ahead of you. Hey, welcome to the Happy Lab. Now, the one thing I pulled out from the conversation we had with Dan was this idea of we are more creative than we give ourselves credit for. And then when we're actively being intentional on working through the issues that we face and trying to find solutions, that we stop being on our heels, so to speak, and actually start leaning forward and taking action. And what that does is that gives you back the power of your life. And that's one of the insidious things I think about normal financial planning is it takes away a lot of that empowerment because we all only depend on the equity markets and the bond markets and the real estate markets. This intentionality in thinking more holistically gives you back the power so you can start being intentional and taking these steps. And that can change your entire dynamic of how you view the future. Maybe you're working with an advisor and have for some time that has really helped you save and invest for the future, but you're finding that they are not having the other discussions to help you create a great life in retirement. If that's the case, I want to make sure you're aware that I work with clients across the country, not just managing their assets, but helping them have lots of little conversations to work towards the life that they want. So if you're looking for an advisor that doesn't just manage assets, but is helping you have the bigger discussions about making it all work, go to rogerwhitney.com, click on contact, and send me an email, and we could set up a time to chat. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. This concludes the two-part series on what might be the solution for the retirement crisis. Until next week, I'm Roger Whitney, the Retirement Answer Man.
We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of Retirement Answer Man. Be sure to visit rogerwhitney.com/answers to access the Retirement Answer Library with over 30 checklists to help you make the most of the only life you have. Remember, you have more power than you realize to create an amazing life starting today with Retirement Answer Man. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Have a wonderful day.